Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just broke down all of the games we didn't have quite a chance to get to throughout the week. A ton of really fun games this week to go with all of the marquee ones. USC, Michigan, Tennessee, OU, Utah going over to Oklahoma State, maybe without Cam Rising. So a number of things going into this weekend, but plenty of filler there as well. Let's get into some players and coaches that are under a microscope in week 4. Feels like this is the first week where this really kicks into high gear, where you have a number of guys who aren't necessarily coaching for their jobs by any means, but a lot of fans will make some big opinions after this weekend. I can almost promise you that, because that's the nature of college football. But there are a number of people that I'm watching going into this weekend, and I think there are a number of ways that I could go with this. But the two biggest people in terms of what this weekend could be and what could end up being an absolutely crazy weekend, in my opinion, is these two guys. Kirk Campbell and Wink Martindale are the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator for Michigan. I think they have the ability to entirely change the Michigan season on Saturday. And frankly, weirdly enough, I think Kirk Campbell might have more on his shoulders than Wink Martindale, because you're changing quarterbacks and because they're looking for an identity over there. You got to buy in. You know what you have in Alex Orji. You know that throwing the ball downfield is not going to be a part of your offense, which means you're going to have to call a beautiful game. It means you're going to have to use motion. You're going to have to be able to get those alignment moving downfield with pulls, or with maybe they're more comfortable in the zone scheme game than you do zone a ton. Whatever it is, he has to be able to execute this at a remarkably high level, because this Michigan offense has been downright terrible, and it's not going to get better throwing the ball with Alex Orji coming into the game. So that means Kirk Campbell's job is going to get that much tougher, especially against a defense that's outkicked their coverage thus far. You're going to have to be able to be on your P's and Q's, because it's going to be really tough to be able to get this offense going, especially if you don't have the passing game that you even had with Davis Warren, which was not much of one either. So he's under a microscope just because he's got to call a good game. He's got to show Michigan fans that this change in quarterback makes sense and that this gives them an identity on offense, and they're going to lean into it. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm very interested to see how he approaches it. And then Wink Martindale, it kind of speaks for itself. The last time he faced an elite offense like Texas, his team got torn to pieces. There's no other way to put it. Steve Sarkisian absolutely took him and his defense to the woodshed. That could happen again with Lincoln Riley easily. It's another elite play caller in this business, and it's another guy that you're going to have to deal with a lot of the same stuff that you dealt with Steve Sarkisian. And then you have Oregon and Ohio State down the road. So it's one of those things that I think a lot of fans will make opinions about Wink Martindale after this game, saying if he can't get it done, they'll say he can't compete with the elite offenses in college football. If he does get it done, then maybe they'll change their tune and feel a little bit better about that Oregon and that Ohio State game going forward. So these guys have a ton on their shoulders. If they can execute at a high level, Michigan can possibly win that game and then turn this entire college football season on its head to what we thought it was the first 3 weeks. And then on the other side, you got D'Anton Lynn. Obviously, his job is going to be huge this upcoming week, but also I think it's been massive just throughout this week overall, because this was probably the most intense week he's had of practice in his career, if I had to imagine. You're going into a place that is going to be physical, is going to test you physically and mentally on Saturday, and you have to make sure all of your guys are ready. I don't know exactly how you do it perfectly. You probably can't, but what you can do is make sure those guys show up every single day and are ready to roll, and he's done a great job of that thus far. This defense has wildly outshot what my expectations were for them thus far, but on top of that, or going forward, it's going to get tougher. You're going to have to be able to tackle really efficiently. You're going to have to be able to not allow yards after carry, yards after contact. You're not going to be able to allow a lot of those things, and it's about to get a lot tougher. You're about to get punched in the face a lot more often. We'll see if his guys can withstand it, and if he can call a defense that is going to be able to withstand all of this attack from Michigan. And I think he definitely has the ability to, but he's going to be tested, and more importantly, his guys are going to be tested this upcoming weekend. And then we have the layup of the day. Nico Iamaleava absolutely is under a big-time microscope. First true road game for this young kid, and it's quite the road game. Going into Oklahoma is a very intense atmosphere. Everyone talked about how intense it was going to be for OU and Texas to walk into these other atmospheres, and it's definitely going to be. Tennessee walking into OU is going to be tough. I can promise you that, especially with a first-year starter at quarterback. It's going to be really interesting to watch this kid. And not only from a football perspective, not only, does he make that pass? Does he do this? How does he walk onto that field? Is he the same guy that he usually is, which is kind of understated, a little bit quiet but confident? Or Does he look a little bit timid? Does he look like he's going through things just a little bit slower than he usually does? And then once he gets in the game, is his feet just a little bit shaky? Is he a little bit fast in the pocket? Does he get rid of the ball a little bit faster than you want him to? A lot of things could go wrong for Nico Iamaleava on Saturday. He's looked incredible thus far, and I think a lot of people are thinking he'll be more than fine, and maybe he will be. Maybe he'll light them on fire, and we'll be able to talk about him as a Heisman contender at the end of the week. But as I'm looking at it right now, there is a lot on this kid's shoulders, and Oklahoma knows that this is a young kid coming in. They're absolutely going to jump on you and give you everything you can handle. We're going to learn about as much about this kid as we're going to learn about anyone this upcoming weekend. Cannot wait to see what he can do in Norman. And then they got the head coach on the other side. Brent Venables, funny enough, I think this might be one of the biggest moments in his entire career, particularly his head coaching career. This is his first game in the SEC against Tennessee, against a former coach that he used to coach with, which obviously adds to this fire just a little bit. And you're absolutely going to have a ton of fans that want this to be the moment. They want this to be the moment where they walk into the SEC, they get a big-time win, and they say, see, all of y'all were talking about how we're going to be in for a rude awakening when we get into the SEC. Turns out y'all were. So I think this is one of those moments that it's same thing with Texas, I guess, in a couple of weeks against Mississippi State. Obviously doesn't have the same juice that this one has. Maybe against that in that Georgia game. That's when Texas wants to make their statement. And this is the one that Oklahoma wants to make their statement in. And this might just have to be BV's best coaching job of his career, where you have an elite offense on the other side. You have so many different ways they can attack you. And then you have all the outside stuff. You have all the stuff that files into this game that's going to file into pretty much every single OU game going forward, because they're all going to be SEC games. And we'll see how they handle all of that. But Brent Venables definitely has to coach a absolute masterpiece on Saturday. And if he does, OU fans are going to want to give him a lifetime contract right away. I can promise you that. And then you got Ollie Gordon up there in that state as well. This is going to be an interesting fight. He's going into this game just not playing very good football. He has not been good enough, and now that O-line has not been good enough, and he is a running back that needs a little bit of a hole to open up. Now, he's plenty special with that hole opening up, but the reality is he's going to need an offensive line. If they're not going to be able to block for him, he's not going to be able to make that one move and then break it downfield. He just doesn't have that quite have that ability the same way that a number of other guys in the country do. He is a special player, and frankly, I think Oklahoma State needs him to do this. Utah is going to be able to sit back a little bit, say we can handle the physicality up front, especially if that's the way your O-line is going to play, and then we're going to force Alan Bowman to throw into tight windows. That means there's going to be openings for Ollie Gordon. There's going to be places where he can take advantage of them, and he better take advantage, because if he doesn't, there is going to be a lot of people asking questions about that offense and about this player going forward. And on top of that, it's kind of a contract game for him. He's going up against Utah, one of the best teams in the conference and in the country. He's going up against Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scaley, who are elite defensive coordinators and are very respected at the next level. He could make a lot of money on Saturday, or he could make a lot of NFL scouts question what he is without an offensive line. So it'll be interesting to watch him unfold, but he's definitely a guy that has a lot on his shoulders this upcoming weekend. And then this kid, he probably has a lot on his shoulders every single week going forward, if I'm being honest with you. But this one's interesting because I think coming off that Colorado game, people felt like that's the end-all be-all. We've seen Dylan Raiola grow up. We've seen him be who he's going to be, and he's going to be incredible throughout the rest of the year. And frankly, I'm a little bit on board with that. I think he's going to be absolutely awesome the rest of the year. He's going to be asked to do more in this game than he was asked to do in Colorado. I promise you that. They are going to be better at stopping the run than Colorado was. They are going to throw him into, make him throw into tighter windows than Colorado did. So he's going to have to be a little bit better. He's going to have to be crisp, and he's been absolutely incredible thus far. But he's going to have to make a couple of throws. He's going to have to grow up a little bit on Saturday, and he's plenty capable of doing that. I think the talent around him is at a level that Nebraska has not had it in quite some time. But it's one of those things that he's going to have to make that one play. Down the stretch of this game, I cannot imagine tonight that there's not going to be a moment that Dylan Raiola doesn't have to roll up his sleeves and make a play himself, and we'll see if he can do that. I think the kid's talent is off the charts incredible, but it's one of those things that Colorado game had all the hype going into it. This game might not have the same hype. I think it's a tougher job for Dylan Raiola offensively. So we'll see what happens with that. Definitely a really fun game. And frankly, we'll be watching him pretty much every week going forward because of the nature of who he is as a player. And then you got Cade Klubnik. We just talked about that App State game. He's got a lot to going into this weekend. And obviously, it's an NC State team that gave up 51 points to Tennessee. doesn't mean they're not solid defensively. I think they have a number of really good things defensively. I think Tony Gibson does a great job with that defense, so they could cause problems. And frankly, if that's the App State defense that they were facing, they have to be just a little bit better than that. They have to be just a little bit structurally sound, and they're going to be more than fine. But at the end of the day, NC State is going through a quarterback change. Clemson is favored by 20 points. It should be a game that they can roll in. But at the end of the day, Kate Klubnik is walking into this one as this is kind of the confirmation game. You saw what you saw at App State, and it was incredible. 5 touchdowns, only 2 incompletions. Everything was about as good as you could possibly ask it to be. This is the game where you prove everyone right, where everyone that's been singing your praises, everyone that's been saying Clemson is going to pull away from the conference after this week, like myself, that has been saying that, he's going to have to be able to prove us right this upcoming weekend. And if he doesn't, if he struggles against this defense that was absolutely torn apart by Tennessee, there's going to be the same questions on Monday. So Clemson was able to get that big-time win. They were able to have a little bit of peace around that program. If they don't do well on offense on Saturday, the same questions are going to pop up, and we're going to have to figure out where they go from there. And then finally, the man that's going to be on this list every single week for the rest of the season, Billy Napier. He is going to have to maybe just win every week if he's want to continue forward as the Florida head coach. He might be fired on the tarmac in Gainesville if he does not win this one, and that would be something that is a real possibility, honestly. I don't know how that Florida job is going to go down right now. We talked about that earlier in the show, and it's a lot more complicated than they would like it to be. But overall, it's one of those things that I don't think this is the biggest game in the season for Florida by any means, at least not going in. But right now, the game in front of him is the most important game because you absolutely have to win it. So it's a very interesting thing around there. There are a ton of fans that if they fall in this one, you are never getting him back. They could win the rest of the games on the schedule. They would have all of this pent-up energy against Billy Napier, and it would be really hard to be able to get that back. So maybe if they lose this game, then all of that stuff I talked about in the first segment, all of the hang-ups that I talked about would go away in a hurry, and I tend to believe that would be the case. But we'll see what happens on that front. Obviously, he has a ton of pressure on him, not only this week, but just the rest of the season. But let's take our third break here. When we come back, I got some best bets for you. We got off to a very tough start yesterday, missing out on that over by literally a missed extra point. But we'll get into all of the stuff I have for this weekend right after this, so stick with us.